Ladies and gentlemen, stop what you're doing. Something just shifted in the banking system, and most people won't realize what happened until it's already too late. I'm talking about a mechanism that's been sitting dormant in the legal code for years, a tripwire that banks can pull at any moment to freeze your account, drain your balance, and lock you out of your own money. And right now, that tripwire is being activated more aggressively than ever before. Let me be very clear about what I'm describing here. This isn't about criminal investigations. This isn't about suspected fraud or money laundering red flags. This is about a process called administrative levy, and it's become the financial system's favorite tool for instant wealth extraction. No court order required, no hearing, no chance to dispute the claim before your account goes to zero. One morning you wake up, you try to buy coffee and your card declines. You check your balance and see a negative number staring back at you. That's when you realize the system just reached into your account and took everything. The mechanics are brutally simple. A government agency, a creditor, or even an automated algorithm flags your account. The bank receives what's called a levy notice. Within hours, sometimes minutes, your funds are frozen. The bank doesn't call you. They don't send a warning. They don't ask questions. They just execute the order, and your money disappears into a holding pattern that can last weeks or months. By the time you figure out what happened, the damage is already done. Bills bounce, rent checks fail, your credit score starts bleeding. And the entity that initiated the levy, they're already moving on to the next target. Now, here's where this gets interesting. The frequency of these levies has been climbing steadily over the past 18 months. We're not talking about a small uptick. We're talking about a systematic increase in the number of accounts being hit with surprise freezes and withdrawals. The IRS has always used levies for tax collection. That's nothing new. But what changed is the speed, the scale, and the automation behind the process. Banks have integrated levy compliance into their back-end systems so deeply that the entire operation runs without human oversight. An electronic notice comes in, the system scans for matching account numbers, and the freeze executes automatically. No verification, no double-checking, no consideration for whether the person actually owes what's being claimed. And this is where the narrative starts to fracture. Because officially, levies are supposed to be a last resort. The story we've been told is that these tools exist to catch tax evaders, deadbeat parents, and people who refuse to pay legitimate debts after exhausting every other option. But that's not what's happening on the ground. People are getting hit with levies for debts they've never heard of, for amounts that don't match any bill they've received, for claims that should have been resolved years ago. The system isn't being used as a scalpel anymore. It's being used as a dragnet. Let me give you the numbers that should make you uncomfortable. In a single fiscal year, federal agencies alone executed more than 3 million account levies. 3 million. That's not 3 million people who refused to pay their taxes. That's 3 million accounts that got drained, many of them belonging to individuals who were in active payment plans, who had disputes pending, or who simply never received proper notice that a levy was coming. State agencies add millions more to that count. Private creditors with court judgments, even more. And the banks facilitating all of this, they collect fees on every single levy they process. They have a financial incentive to execute these orders quickly and without question. Now you're starting to see the architecture of the problem. This isn't just about government overreach or creditor aggression. This is about a system where every participant benefits from speed and volume, and no one benefits from accuracy or fairness. The agency that issues the levy doesn't face consequences if they target the wrong account. The bank doesn't lose money if they freeze funds that shouldn't have been touched. The only person who suffers is the account holder, and by the time they navigate the bureaucratic maze to prove the levy was a mistake, the damage has already compounded. Overdraft fees, late payment penalties, damaged credit, lost housing, jobs lost because paychecks bounced. This is where things stop making sense. Because the legal framework that governs levies was written in an era when banks had human tellers and paper ledgers. The rules assume that someone at the bank is reviewing each levy notice, confirming the details, and making a judgment call about whether the action is appropriate. But that's not how modern banking works. Everything is automated. Everything is instantaneous. The system has been optimized for one thing: compliance speed. Banks don't get penalized for freezing the wrong account. They get penalized for delays. So they built their systems to pull the trigger first and ask questions never. And here's the layer that no one is talking about. The rise in levy activity coincides almost perfectly with the expansion of data sharing agreements between banks and government agencies. Over the past 3 years, financial institutions have been required to report more account information, more transaction data, and more customer details to federal and state systems. The official justification was enhanced tax compliance and fraud prevention. But what it actually created was a surveillance infrastructure that makes it trivially easy for any agency with the right access to identify accounts and initiate levies in bulk. They don't need to investigate individual cases anymore. They can run algorithms against the data, generate lists of target accounts, and fire off levy notices by the thousands. Let's talk about the AI angle, because this is where the system goes from aggressive to dystopian. Several major banks have started using artificial intelligence to predict which accounts are at risk of future levy actions. The idea, supposedly, is to alert customers early so they can resolve issues before a freeze happens. But that's not how it's being deployed. What's actually happening is that banks are using these AI systems to preemptively flag accounts as high risk, which triggers internal restrictions even before any levy notice arrives. Your account gets shadow limited. You can't transfer large amounts. You can't make certain purchases. You can't close the account and move your money. And you have no idea it's happening because the bank doesn't disclose the restriction. They just quietly throttle your access. And when the levy eventually comes, your funds are already trapped. This isn't theoretical. There are documented cases of people discovering that their accounts had been internally flagged months before any official action was taken. The bank's AI determined that a levy was statistically likely, so the account was marked for future compliance action. The customer continued using the account normally, paying bills, receiving deposits, completely unaware that their funds were already sitting in a digital cage. When the levy finally hit, there was no escape route, no time to move money, no ability to protect assets. The system had predicted their vulnerability and positioned itself to capitalize on it the moment the opportunity arrived. Now think about the implications. If banks can use predictive algorithms to anticipate levy actions, what stops them from using the same technology to anticipate other forms of account seizure? Asset forfeiture, civil penalties, divorce settlements, lawsuit judgments. The infrastructure is already in place. The data is already being collected. The only question is how aggressively the system will be used, and based on current trends, the answer is vary. And this brings us to the international dimension, because what's happening in the United States is not isolated. Other countries are watching, and some are already implementing similar systems. The European Union has been pushing for harmonized cross-border levy enforcement, which would allow one member state to initiate account freezes in another member state with minimal friction. The UK is exploring digital levy systems that could execute in real time against cryptocurrency wallets and digital payment platforms. Australia recently expanded its tax office's authority to issue garnishment orders without court approval. The model is spreading, and it's always justified with the same language: efficiency, compliance, closing the gap on tax evasion. But efficiency for whom? Because from where I'm sitting, the only people experiencing efficiency are the agencies and institutions extracting the money. For everyone else, this system represents maximum friction, maximum uncertainty, maximum vulnerability. You can have a clean tax record, a stable income, and a spotless credit history, and still wake up one day to find your account frozen because an algorithm somewhere decided you matched a risk profile. And once you're in the system, getting out is nearly impossible. Even if you prove the levy was wrong, even if the agency admits the mistake, the process of recovering your funds can take months. And in the meantime, life doesn't pause. Bills still come due, rent doesn't wait, food costs money. Let me paint you a picture of what this looks like in practice. Imagine you're a small business owner. You run a legitimate operation, you pay your taxes, you file everything on time. But 3 years ago, there was a discrepancy in your quarterly filings. You hired an accountant, they fixed it, you submitted an amended return, and as far as you know, the issue was resolved. Fast forward to today, you wake up to find your business account frozen. $30,000? Gone. Your payroll is due in 2 days. You have suppliers waiting for payment. You call the bank and they tell you a levy was executed by the IRS. You call the IRS and they tell you the levy is for that discrepancy from 3 years ago, plus penalties and interest. You explain that the issue was already resolved, but they say there's no record of the amended return in their system. Now you're trapped in a bureaucratic loop while your business starts to collapse. Employees quit, suppliers blacklist you, clients lose confidence, and even if you eventually prove that the levy was a mistake, the damage is irreversible. This scenario isn't hypothetical. It's happening every day, across every sector, to people who did everything right. And the scale is accelerating. Because once the system tastes how easy it is to extract money directly from accounts, there's no incentive to pull back. Every agency sees the revenue potential. Every bank sees the fee potential. Every politician sees the compliance optics. No one sees the human cost, because the people getting crushed by the system don't have a lobby. They don't have a voice in the rooms where these policies are written. And here's the part that should terrify you. The legal protections that are supposed to prevent abuse, they're being systematically eroded. There used to be requirements for advance notice before a levy could be executed. Those requirements have been watered down or eliminated entirely in many jurisdictions. There used to be exemptions for certain types of income, like Social Security or disability payments. Those exemptions are increasingly ignored, with agencies arguing that the funds lost their protected status once they were deposited into a standard bank account. There used to be caps on how much could be taken in a single levy action. Those caps are being raised or removed, allowing agencies to drain entire accounts in one move. The system is being optimized for extraction, and the optimization is happening faster than most people realize. Banks are investing heavily in compliance automation. Government agencies are expanding their data access. Private creditors are lobbying for easier levy processes. And the public? The public is being conditioned to accept this as normal. Every time someone hears about a tax cheat getting their account frozen, it reinforces the narrative that levies are a tool of justice. But the reality is that for every legitimate target, there are dozens of ordinary people getting caught in the machinery, having their lives upended by a system that moves too fast to correct its own mistakes. So what does this mean for you? It means that the financial stability you think you have is more fragile than you realize. It means that the money sitting in your account right now is not actually under your control. It's under the bank's control, and the bank operates under a legal framework that prioritizes compliance with levy orders above your access to your own funds. It means that any entity with the right legal authority or bureaucratic access can reach into your account and take whatever they claim you owe, and you won't know it's happening until it's already done. And the trajectory here is clear. More automation, more data sharing, more predictive algorithms, more accounts flagged, more levies executed, less human oversight, less opportunity to dispute, less protection for ordinary people trying to navigate a system that's no longer designed to serve them. The infrastructure is already in place. The precedents are being set. The legal barriers are being removed. All that's left is the question of how far this goes before people start to notice, before the pressure builds, before the system's appetite for instant extraction creates enough collateral damage that someone, somewhere, decides to pump the brakes. But I'm not seeing any signs of that happening. What I'm seeing is expansion. What I'm seeing is momentum. What I'm seeing is a financial system that's discovered it can treat your account like a vending machine. And as long as the legal paperwork is in order, there's nothing stopping them from taking whatever they want, whenever they want, for whatever reason they decide is valid. If this continues, the freeze you're worried about won't be the one that targets criminals. It will be the one that targets you, for a reason you never saw coming, executed by a system that doesn't care whether it's right or wrong. It just cares that it's efficient. And by the time you realize what happened, your account will already be empty, your appeals will already be filed, and your life will already be in pieces. That's not speculation. That's the system we're living in right now, and it's getting more aggressive every single day. Stay alert.